All right. So there are so many wonderful universities that are outside of the US. Now, you can, of course, apply anywhere in the world and go to school anywhere in the world. I'm going to talk primarily about Canada and Europe right now because that's where most of my students decide to apply. But of course, there are many universities all over the world. A lot of what I'm about to say is going to apply to those as well, but I'm just going to be specific about these. So, Canada. Let's talk about Canada. I've got a lot of students who apply to school in Canada. Some of them have dual citizenship in Canada. If you have dual citizenship, I would recommend looking into the Canadian because you might get a big discount slash I call it in-country tuition. But the thing about that is that you can kind of only get in-country tuition if your parents have paid taxes in Canada over the parts of the last 5 years. I think it's 3 of the last 5 years. So you do have to make sure that that's possible for you, but you can always talk to your parents about that. The Canadian schools are awesome. Some of them are on the Common App. Some of them are not. They have their own websites or their own programs, ways to apply. So if there's a school in Canada you're interested in, just go on their website and see what their application process looks like. Basically the same. It's a personal statement and the rest of the application. So a lot of times you can just send them your Common App essay and you'll be fine. Now, for schools in Europe, it's a bit more complicated. They use a system called UCAS, UCAS. If you Google UCAS, the website will come right up. And it's just like the Common App, with one notable exception. You can only apply to 5 different programs, okay? Not schools, programs, which means if you want to go to the University of Edinburgh for English, or you might want to go to the University of Edinburgh for science, like chemistry or bio or something, that's 2 of your 5, okay? So you have to select which major, essentially, which degree program you want to be in, and that counts as 1, even if it's at the same school as another one you want to go to. So at least for now, the UCAS schools are a lot of the schools in Europe, a lot of the schools in the UK as well. There are schools in Europe that take the Common App, okay? So just check on that. American University in Paris is one of them, AUP. They have been on the Common App, but it always changes. So you always got to check. Just go check. So the UCAS, when you're doing the UCAS, I really want you to be careful with this one because the directions are a little bit different from the Common App. And I would recommend having someone go through it with you. You have to send emails to the people who are giving your letters of rec. And then they get those emails and submit their letter of rec using a form that the UCAS sends them. So that's a little bit different from the Common App. So you kind of have to ask. And there's a personal statement. It's just like the Common App essay. Usually my students who apply to UCAS schools just recycle their Common App essay. Maybe they tweak it a little bit or change some things, but usually they just use the Common App essay, and I've had great luck with that. So what you must do, though, if you want to go to school in Europe, is if you have an EU passport or UK passport, you should check with your parents and see, did they pay taxes in Europe? Because that really changes the price structure of those schools. Americans going over pay a lot of money. Well, there, Europeans who go there, it can actually be quite inexpensive if you kind of play correctly. So I think that getting an education in Europe would be amazing. I studied abroad in Europe when I was in college. Highly recommend it. If you want to go to school in Europe, that's kind of a whole extra thing because your parents will have to hop the pond to go see you. Maybe that's exactly what you want. But I have had several students go to schools in Europe and they're having a wonderful experience. You will want to check, the country that your school is in, because keep in mind, if you go to school in France, you're going to have to learn French. Okay. You go to school in Spain, you're going to have to learn Spanish. And there are many a lot of people speak English in Europe, of course, but not everybody. Okay. And if you go to school in Ireland or the UK, of course, there will be a lot of English speakers there, but it would behoove you to understand that you'll need to learn some more languages if you're going to live in Europe. That's kind of part of the deal, and it will really help you if you decide that you want to apply to schools in Europe, go on the UCAS website right now and go check it out. Take a look at it. It's quite different from the Common App. There's a lot of other buttons and other things that you kind of need to figure out. And I would recommend going through it with someone to make sure you've got everything. But most of the information is basically the same. You just have to really be on top of it and make sure you're submitting on time. Now, speaking of submitting on time, there is a vast difference in the admissions process with the European schools and the American schools. A lot of European schools have rolling admissions. So if you apply, your application will be reviewed, And once it's reviewed, if the answer is yes, you get a letter. Like, you get in. You don't have to wait until like April or May to find out. They will send it to you almost immediately. Not every school, but a lot of them will. And so some of my students apply in fall of senior year, and they're in by October. They already have their letter, and they're like, hey, I got in. Like, sounds good. The other thing that can happen is if you miss the admission cycle for American schools, the European admission cycle is much longer. So they're letting kids in for the fall semester in like June, like May and June. So you can apply whenever. So if you want to apply to European schools, you have a lot longer. Don't wait. Like, don't wait until spring to do it. But you can. And if that's something you're interested in, the timeline's a little bit different. So just keep in mind that you have a little bit more time to apply to those schools and send in all the applications and stuff. But it would behoove you to do it sooner rather than later, because also, like, they won't have chosen anyone. So if your application's in early, they're going to look at it and be like, oh, sounds good. Come on over. That would be really so. I hope this has been helpful. There's like a lot more to say about this. I tutor people on just this specific thing sometimes. So if you need help with this, totally reach out. But no matter what happens, get started early, just like with all of this stuff, and follow all the